Alright, so we're back to our experiment. I'm going to call this take 2. I used soap and water, cleaned out the bin, the cover, so hopefully there's no residual, I don't know, eggs, whatever. I've also been baking out in the Florida sun for a while, so there's that. We're going to take it inside. I got the whole setup ready to go here for us. Now, oh yeah, this is like hot to the touch. Thanks, Florida. I know it's technically not a sterilization process, but it kind of is. So there's still like some mold from the first attempt in here that kind of stained it. I used hot soap and water. I scrubbed it. It didn't really, that part didn't come out. So it's like, whatever, not our biggest problem. So we're going to work on this take 2 here on our porch. All of our lovely orchids. Did some great harvests this morning. So for plan number 2, or experiment number 2, I should say, plan is a few different things we're changing. One, we are going to just preemptively add the browns, so the paper, essentially products, in as a moisture control method, because if you guys saw experiment number 1, that was the problem. Or a problem. There was a lot of moisture in there. Too much. Definitely too much. And troubleshooting number 2 is I pre-froze 2 containers of food scraps. And if you recall and you saw experiment number 1, I put like 6 containers of food in here. And I'm only putting 2 small containers. And I think it was like 4 big salad containers and 2 small salad containers. So I'm doing 2 small ones, but they're frozen. And the reason I'm doing that is because, 1, I can only fit so many containers in my freezer at one time. But 2, because they're frozen, there's going to be a lot of moisture in there. And it'll break down even quicker. So just kind of thinking about moisture control. That's why I want to slow it down. But I'm freezing them mostly to try to prevent any bugs from coming in, because obviously if you saw experiment number 1, there were a lot of bugs and larvae and stuff in there, and I'm assuming it's because the food was not frozen, because I checked all of these mesh tapes. I didn't see any like damages or anything like that. There's nothing remarkable in the sense of like anything coming in. So I think it's pretty solid. I don't know. I'm new at this, obviously. That's why it's an experiment. And before we get started on actually filling everything, the objective of this experiment is to figure out how we can pre-compost some of our excessive amounts of food scraps that our worms aren't currently able to consume quickly enough, so that way they can pre-compost in a way that doesn't attract things that we don't want to put inside in our hot frog composter. So that's the objective. Can it be done? I don't know, but that's the way we're trying. Experiment number 2. All right, so I'll let you guys watch as we fill up this bucket. So I have just a bunch of random paper towels, some that accidentally went through the wash. So I'm putting those in the bottom because they'll break down. And then I have a decent amount of shredded cardboard, not really newspaper, just regular office paper, just random paper. So I put 2 scoops down to start with, and I have a plan. We'll see if it works. So this is container number 1. It's still very frozen. You could see it was molding before I put it in the freezer. So hopefully it just pops out of its container, boop, like a giant moldy ice popsicle. And so what I'm really pleased about is that it's kind of sitting on all of the bedding, or well, I guess it is bedding, but I'm trying to bury a lot of it, if that makes sense. Not because I'm worried about the bugs, but because I am trying to keep the moisture control. This is another container. Frozen in there. All right. And so I'm going to use the last of my shredded stuff here. Hopefully I put too much in, and that's the problem. I have too much dryness in here, but we'll find out. Oh, I also have an 8 carton container, which I'm just going to rip up. I know that'll get broken down eventually. Boop. And that's all we're doing. So just for comparison purposes, because I know we did it last experiment. So we actually are pretty much at the same height of bucket fullness as we were for experiment number 1. It was pretty much, my goal was to have it be just below the vent lines because I didn't want it to be blocked. So this should be interesting to see. There's no drainage holes on the bottom, so all the moisture is staying in here, which is fine, I think, because we put an absurd amount, I think, of the shredded bedding and whatnot that we normally use for the worms. So hopefully 2 containers can get enough moisture to be absorbed by this stuff and it can break down. And I'm thinking, because the food is already broken or shrunk a little, what is the word, compacted a little bit, being in the freezer, that as it melts it'll break down even quicker. So it'll be really interesting to see how much of the paper elements here compact and shrink when it's absorbed all the water, or most of the water. So we're gonna check in on this. I think I'm trying not to open it too much. I want to let it sit, but it is going to be in the 90s this week here in Florida, because Florida, so it should melt, I would think, by tonight, if not sooner. But I want to give it a few days to really absorb all the way through, and I think we sandwiched our moldy ice blocks enough. So we wait and see. Good boys are doing their sits. Okay, who do spin? We do spin. Come on, we're working on spin. Spin. Okay, Wally did good spin. 1 freezer treat for Wally. Moose, come on, you gotta do your spin. There you go. Good spin. Thanks, babies. Yeah, we're on this porch. It's so empty now because they just painted. And I figured, well, I'm gonna try and clean the carpet a little bit. So I figured I'll give them one of their freezer treats out here while we're out here. So the porch is super empty. It's almost echoing. They just painted the house and they also did the porch while they were here. It's the same colors. The landlords kept it the same, which I agree. I guess, and, you know, it's a neutral thing. So we had to clear off the porch. So I'm going to try and, I don't know, pressure wash is the right word, but like pressurize with the hose some of the carpet so it gets some of the doggy dirt out of it. But I figured before I do that, I can check on our compost. It's actually been about a week and a half since we started this one, compost number 2, and it's also been about the same that I used up pretty much the last of my compost, maybe not everything, but most of it on my pepper seedlings, trying again. So if you guys haven't seen my Instagram for this or not, milkweed seed, the first 2 rows are pepper seeds with compost, and then the last rows are pepper seeds without compost. Just trying to see who is germinating quicker. And it's interesting because for the most part we're seeing germination slightly quicker with the compost side, and like I'm just using like a scoop or 2 of compost, so it's not heavily mixed in there. We definitely did see a difference with the milkweed that I started with and without the compost. There's definitely these guys are with compost, these are without, and this one's definitely smaller, so generally good progress overall. So pretty pleased about that. But more importantly, we're supposed to be checking on our bucket over here. So we did not put as much compost in last time, and Michael had some good tips on what to look for or do the second time around, so I'm going to ease into it. So I haven't opened it. It's been mostly in the porch, although it did have to sit in the garage and outside, depending on what day it was, while they were painting. I have one container of frozen food ready to go, mosquito bits, and then our shredded paper. So the first, I don't want to change too many variables at once, so I thought mosquito bits are probably a good place to start with. We'll go from there. Like you guys saw a few minutes ago earlier in the video, we did it very differently this time. Less food, frozen food, more bedding. All right, well, initially I'm really pleased. I haven't seen any bugs fly at me, so yay. I'm trying to make sure you guys can see. I'll bring it in. I'm just trying to see if there's anything to see. It does smell like a very little bit. There's definitely moisture and condensation in here, but I honestly, like, there's food in here, but I don't really see anything crawling, which is good. No maggots. I think that's promising. Okay. Well, I'm not going to think too hard about it. I am going to just sprinkle in a few mosquito bits because I realize that they activate when they get wet and soaked into things. So if they activate now, great. If they activate later, great. I also don't really care that much because I think they'll be okay in here. So can tell, just as a comparison from experiment 1 to experiment 2, the holes have prevented any obvious amounts of creatures flying or otherwise to get in here. So I think the holes with this tape inside the screen tape that we use are pretty secure. I know it was recommended to try like doing double-sided tape to make sure they don't, like, you know, if they break one berry, maybe they don't get to the other, but I don't want to change too many things at once because I want to know what the determining factor could be. So I have one solid container full of frozen stuff. I did put eggshells in here because I bought quail eggs, which I love. I don't buy them very often because they're hard to find, but when I do, I really indulge in them because I love them with my garden tomatoes and garden basil for breakfast. They make just with a little garlic and a little salt and pepper. It's so good. It's kind of an omelet. It's kind of, I guess it's not really an omelet because you're not really mixing them, but it's essentially roasted tomatoes with garlic and basil, and then you put the quail eggs in towards the end, and they are so good. All right, well, there's still a lot of bedding in here, or browns, whatever we want to call that, moisture control. So I am going to go ahead, and I don't truthfully have a lot of extra browns right now, but I really feel better putting a bunch in here, seeing how much that takes up. So with this much browns in here, we are pretty much at the level that the air can potentially be blocked in. So I think I like the idea of just adding one thing of the frozen food, or I think I added 2 last time. So I want to go get one of my other containers of frozen food and add it in here. And yes, I did cover it when it went inside because I was just worried about anything flying in. So we have another salad container, frozen assorted things. So a mix of all sorts of fruits and veggies. Yes, I do have citrus in there. I don't really worry about it too much. I don't put that much in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I like frozen stuff now. Like, I'm starting to get more appreciative of it. I think than like maybe I used to be at the very beginning, because besides the fact that it's easier to manage the bugs with, I really like that it's easy to physically work with. So, oops. All right, so is it 100% covered in here? No, but it's pretty close. There's plenty of moisture. We're not really trying to cover it because I'm not super worried about bugs getting in. I'm mostly worried about the moisture getting out of control and stinky and smelly. So we're gonna check on this. I don't know, I'm gonna shoot for another week or so. I'm not really sure what I'm looking for other than breaking things down that can go into my worm bin. So it's off to a good start. It's definitely mushy down there. I tried to mix it like you saw. So I'm thinking next week or in a week or two, we'll check in, see how much this is decomposed and broke down. And then if it is some level of broken down slash starting to deteriorate, like you can't identify as easily what things are, then maybe we'll think about next steps into bringing it into the worms. I'm trying to decide if I want to try and make an outdoor bin for this to go in. So like once it's outdoors, it stays outdoors. But I don't actually have a lot of worms right now, or I don't have a huge number of worms that I could start a whole bin from scratch with probably. So that's kind of what I'm trying to decide on right now. Let me know if you guys have recommendations. Otherwise, I'll check in with you for realsies in a couple weeks or in a week or two, whenever we check in on this. I just wanted you guys to see the start and then the check-in, just so you could immediately see how much of a good idea this was. But I think since we added the mosquito bits and the food's frozen this time, I think we're gonna be off to a better start, and we're easing into the amount of food that we're putting in here. We're not putting too much all at once. We're putting 1 or 2 containers at a time, and they're frozen this time. So thank you all for the tips. Please keep them coming. They help, and then hopefully others learn. All right, guys, until next time.